Thank you very much. Good evening. Once more, participants are welcome to our final day for module. We are going to do a marathon today because we don't have the luxury of time. And last time we stopped at the psychiatry session. Now we are going to do that and then move on to module 6. So we are going to now start scoring the psychiatry status. It's very easy to score. It's not as difficult as the alcohol and drug session, and we'll move pretty fast. So the instructions are very clear. Now let's start the scoring or decoding. How many times have you been treated for any psychological or emotional problems in a hospital or inpatient setting? Hello, George.
Yeah, hello. No, yes. I've not been treated.
So we're now going to the psychiatric status.
Yes.
But I don't know. I think these instructions are just similar, so I don't want to go to the PowerPoint at this time. I don't want to. They are very clear and just similar to the one we have here in the ASI because we don't have time. So I want to go straight to the ASI so that we can score it. It's not different from what is here. So we're now switching up, to the psychiatric status. Thank you so far for helping us and for cooperating with us. Thank you for the time and the patience, really. So now, George, we are going to the final part of this assessment, which is the psychiatric status. And remember, this is what we administer to everyone as a standard, assessment for everyone who comes to the treatment center. So let's get started. How many times, George, have you been treated for any psychological or emotional problems in a hospital or inpatient setting?
No, not in an inpatient setting.
Okay.
No.
You haven't?
No,
so participant, what do you score there?
0, 1. No, 0, is it 0, 0? Okay, 0, 0.
Thank you. Okay. Then, yes, George, okay, how many times have you been treated for any psychological or emotional problems, as an outpatient or private patient?
About 3 times in my life.
Were you treated for drugs or just for mental health problems, psychological issues?
Yeah, for emotional issues.
Was it drugs?
No, for emotional issues. Emotional issues.
For emotional issues. So how many times?
3 times.
3 times. Thank you. So what do you score?
0, 3.
Thank you, Fatima.
Yes.
So let's go to P3. Do you receive a pension for a psychiatric disability? Any mental health issues? Are you on pension?
No, I'm not on pension.
Okay. So what is coded there?
0.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, participants. Okay, let's go to P4. Have you had a significant period of time that was not a direct result of alcohol or drug use in which you have experienced serious depression, sadness, hopelessness, or loss of interest in the past 30 days?
In the past 30 days, probably about 2 times.
Okay, 2 times.
About 2 times.
Okay.
Yes.
What about in your lifetime, beyond the 30 days?
Yes, that has been several, probably about 10 times, probably.
About 10 times?
It's about 10 times, yes.
Okay, so what do you call participants for the 30 days?
2.
Yes, okay, thank you. What about for the lifetime?
You said 10.
Okay.
But there's only 1 box there.
No.
Pardon? Pardon?
He said, I thought he said 10 times.
Yes.
But there is
That's
only
for
one
lifetime.
box. Yeah.
That's not for lifetime. There are two boxes, the past 30 days and the lifetime.
Yes, for the 30 days is 2.
Okay. I understand. But just go ahead and squeeze it in there. Thank you for that observation, Fatima.
Okay.
So, have you had a significant period of time that was not a direct result of alcohol or drug use in which you have experienced serious anxiety, tension, uptight, unreasonably worried, or inability to feel relaxed? George?
Yes.
Okay, in the past 30 days.
In the past
How
30
many?
days. Council, I'm not sure the question wants to know how many. I think the question wants to find out whether it is a yes or no.
Have you had a significant period of time in the past 30 days? I just wanted to probe, actually. Okay.
Yes, Councillor, but I think your question wants to find out whether it is a yes or no. So I think the number of times.
Yes.
Okay. Yes or no.
Yes. Okay. 0 is sorry. No is 0, and then yes is 1. Fatima. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, George. And then, have you had a significant period of time? Any problems?
No. I was trying to say, so P4 will be 1-1.
Pardon?
I said, so question P4 will be 1-1.
1-1. Yes, 0
Yes.
is no, and then yes is yes. Okay. So, have you experienced a period of time that was not a direct result of alcohol or drug use in which you have experienced hallucinations, saw things that and heard voices that others didn't see or hear?
Not in the last 30 days.
Not 30 days.
Not in the last 30 days.
Okay. So what do you score there?
0.
Okay. What about in the past, in your lifetime, beyond the 30 days?
Yes, that has happened.
Okay.
So what will be our score there?
1.
What will be our score? What about experiencing trouble understanding, concentrating, or remembering in the past 30 days that was not related to drugs or alcohol?
Yes, has happened.
Okay. What about in your lifetime?
Even so.
Okay. Now let's go to P8. Have you had a significant drug use?
Did we jump P6?
Pardon?
Did we jump P6?
No, I didn't. I asked about hallucination.
Okay.
He said yes.
Okay.
Are you okay?
Yes, I'm okay.
Okay, so let's go to
P8.
of time, despite your alcohol and controlling violent behavior, including evidence. This is despite your alcohol and drug use.
Yes.
Pardon?
Yes.
Okay. So what will in the past 30 days? You say yes. What about in your lifetime?
Even so.
So what do you quote here?
1-1.
Thank you. P9. Have you experienced serious thoughts of suicide in spite of your alcohol or drug use in the past 30 days? Maybe you contemplated, or you wrote a note, or you attempted.
Not in the past 30 days.
Not in the past 30 days. Okay. So what do you code, P9?
0.
Thank you. What about in your lifetime beyond 30 days?
Yes.
You have. Have you experienced drugs in your lifetime?
Yes.
Okay. So what do you code?
1.
1.
Thank you. Then we'll go to P10. Have you actually attempted suicide?
No, not attempted. Not attempted. Not attempted.
Okay. In the past, what about your lifetime? This includes whether you have actually suggested, maybe even suggested you are going to carry it out, or maybe you took something and eventually didn't actually commit the act, but you wanted to use a particular method, but or you even attempted leaving it, or even actually not been attempted.
No, never attempted.
Okay. In the past, I didn't know. What about the lifetime?
Even in the lifetime, no.
So what are we calling there?
0.
Okay. You know, sometimes one can attempt a suicide by using overdose of drugs and so on and so forth, but this is outside the the drug use. So let's go to P11. Have you had a significant period of time, despite your alcohol and drug use, in which you have been prescribed medication for any psychological or emotional problems by a physician, for instance, or a psychiatrist?
No, since I'm seeing a counselor, it's purely psychological intervention.
So no prescription?
No, it's purely psychological.
Okay. So what do we score there? What do we code?
0.
Okay. Does everyone agree?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about in the past, in your lifetime, have you had a significant period of time, despite your alcohol and drug use, in which you were prescribed medication for any psychological or emotional problem in your lifetime?
It also applies here. No, it also applies here. It's a no.
Pardon?
It also applies here. It's a no.
Okay. So what do you got there?
0.
Okay. So let's go to 12. How many days in the past 30 days have you experienced this psychological or emotional problem?
Severally, this week, quite a number of times has come. I can't be able to quantify, but should be well over 8 times so far this month.
Well over?
8 times.
So do we call 10 or 11? You say well over. So give us a specific number.
Doctor, it's hard to keep records on 1 year down the low, but we can approximate about 10.
10. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the effort. So what do you call there?
10.
Okay. Let's go to P12. So
P13.
you now use your, pardon?
P13, that's where we are going.
Okay, sorry, P13, yeah, thank you. So P13, you now use your client rating or patient rating card. How much have you been troubled or bothered by this psychological or emotional problem in the past 30 days? Please use your client or patient rating card and rate it for us.
I think I'm considerably troubled.
Considerably. Okay. So what, participants, hello, what do you call there? What is considerable on the class reporting card? Hello? Hello?
Hello, sir.
Yes, I said, what do you score there? 13. He said considerably.
3, sir. 3.
Okay,
Considerably is 3.
thank you.
Yeah, with you, Prof.
Okay, thank you. So how important to you now is treatment for this psychological or emotional problem? Also use your client rating card and tell us how important to you, now is treatment for this psychological emotional problems. George.
It's considerably important. I'll give it a scale of 3.
So what do you call?
You see the black coming out.
Oh, UTC.
But this
Okay.
time
3. So this is continuous at P15. The following items are to be completed by the interviewer at the time of the interview. This one is now for us, not for actually judge now. It's for us to complete. And the question is, at the time of the interview, the patient was, if it's 0, that means there was no. But if you observed it, no, during your interaction, then you said yes. So for instance, P50 was obviously depressed or withdrawn. Now I'm not seeing George's face, but from the interview, we had, we have a very confident patient. Do you think he was depressed or withdrawn? Okay, thank you. So 0.
1.
Pardon?
So 0, 0.
If he said no, it's 0. If he said
Yes.
yes, yes. So we
Yes.
said 0.
Yes.
Was he obviously hostile? Was George obviously hostile?
No.
No.
0. Was he obviously anxious or nervous?
No.
Yes. He was calm, confident. Was he having trouble with reality testing, thought disorders, or paranoid thinking? As from the rest of, do you think he maybe had
No.
hallucinations? Okay, thank you. 0.
No. Mhm.
Did he have trouble comprehending or concentrating or remembering?
No.
Okay, 0. Do you think it was having suicidal thoughts?
No.
No.
Okay, thank you. So we are through with the psychiatric this interview. So that completes the ASI. But for every session now, there's an interviewer severity rating. Yes. So, and that is what I was trying to introduce initially. For instance, now, how will you rate the patient's need for psychiatric or psychological treatment? And the interviewer rating is I will read it out to you. For instance, 0 to 1 is no problem. And then 2 to 3 is slight problem. 4 to 6 is moderate problem. And then 6 to 7 is severe problem. And then 6 to 9 is extreme problem. So this one is based on your own rating, not what is said. So you look at the interviewer rating scale, and then you rate based on your interaction with him on each section. You know, we are not going through all this because time is not on our side. We have so much to cover. That's why I waited the ASI to score it. But the rating scale is there right there. Let me scroll to the beginning. Sorry, just a minute, please. The instructions are there. Just a moment. Oh, it's not the big. See, there are different versions, but I'm sure on the hard copy you have the interviewer rating scale, right?
Yes, we have it.
Okay, so that's what you use actually, to rate his responses. So let's go on. Sorry, let me scroll down. So then the confidence rating here is the above information significantly distorted by patient's misrepresentation. Do you think the information he gave was distorted?
No.
Okay, I agree with you. Or was the patient, unable to understand our questions?
No.
No.
Oh,
He understood.
okay.
You understood everything.
Okay, thank you.
Understood all the questions.
So thank you very much. That is great. You understood all the questions. So for here, if for instance there is a special code here, G12. If for instance one patient terminated by interviewer because of problems we elicited earlier on, maybe wasn't comprehending whatever, or a patient refused to answer so that the interview was not completed, or patient was unable to respond due to language or intellectual barrier, or interview completed. So what do we quote here? Did you complete the interview or not?
He did.
Thank you.
N.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
So these are the postcards that we use. Sorry. So this is the one for the interviewer. You can see the rating for the interviewer differs from the patient. The patient gave his own subjective information for scoring. Now we are using our own interviewers. Okay. Regarding him. Sorry, please put on your phone. Thank you very much. Can you speak on your phone, please? So the interviewer severity rating scales, this is where you do your own objective assessment, because whatever the patient presented to you from one end was a subjective one. So as you are interviewing him, you see there are other things. For instance, we try to find out whether he was anxious or whatever, or whether he was hallucinating, he lost touch with reality, so on and so forth, or whether he was not cooperative, he didn't understand the question. This is your own opinion now. As you observe the client, this is your own responsibility as the interviewer to do this. So their rating here will be the objective rating. So 0 to 1, no real problem, treatment not indicated. For every section, you do that. And then slight problem, that's 2 to 3 with slight problem, treatment probably not necessary. 4 to 5 with moderate problem, some treatment indicated. And then 6 to 7, considerable problem, treatment necessary. And then 8 to 9, extreme problem, treatment absolutely necessary. So, okay, let's attempt to rate judge as participants, all of us. What do you think the rating here will be for us as interviewers? Anyone can answer, please.
Yes, I think 4 to 5.
Pardon?
I think 4 to 5. Moderate problem, some treatment indicated.
Thank you very much. Any other?
Moderate problems, 4 to 5.
Okay, moderate problems, same thing. Any other? So that we can move on.
The same, Prof.
The same, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So now, okay, now we go to module 6. So that we can move on, because we have finished scoring the assist now. Let's go to what the narrative summary and whatever talks about. So when you have scored, you are going to actually be able to give a feedback. You are going to be able to give a feedback and then also do your narrative report. But let's see what they're all about.
Hi, Moses, I don't know if it's just me, but I seem to have lost your audio.
My audio?
Okay, you're back now. It looked like you were speaking, but I didn't hear anything. I can hear you now, though.
Okay. So we're through with the psychiatric session. So this was the patient rating scale. We have done it, and then there should be a small group exercise where you practice, scoring it. You have 2 people, then you role play and practice scoring, and then you discuss it with somebody who is observing, and then you change. Because what we do is also necessary for you to actually go back home and practice it. If it's a face-to-face interaction, then we'll have plenty of time to role play and to carry the exercise so that it becomes something that you're conversant with. So then we'll talk about the interviewer severity ratings. Review and document client importance rating we have done that now. And then they objectively rate the extent to which effective intervention is needed for each problem area. We said that, and then develop a common systematic method for estimating severity of each problem area. And then this is the scale we use. And the note I said here, it is an objective rating because, and this is it, we said, what the client gave us is the subjective one, but your own assessment and rating is what you term the objective rating. So this is another case study. you would, in a face-to-face medium, you'll be able to do that and practice, but we don't have the lots of time, so let's move on. So feedback and discussion. So when you have done this, you are supposed to be able to give a feedback. So you process and discuss the practice session with the entire group. And then, but that you will not be able to do that because of the time. So now we're going to module 6 now. Is there any question before we continue? Hello?
No, sir, no.
Because when you do it, you are supposed to give the patient the feedback. After doing your own interview, rating, assessment, whatever, you are supposed to discuss the results with the client and tell him, what you have seen, so that you understand yourself, and he also has the, the understanding or the impression that you understood him, and the report is actually about him and not just a figment of your own imagination. And if there are any controversies, whatever in each session, you can reconcile those. So it's always good to give the client feedback. You don't just do it and keep it, because it's going to form the basis for our treatment planning. So we'll now go to module 6. Sorry. Just a minute, please. My system is a bit slow. Okay. Can you see it? Please, can you see my screen?
Yes, we
Yes, we
can.
can see.
Yes, you can.
Okay, please. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. So we're now going to this module 6. We talk about person-centered planning. What is the essence of the assessment? You can see how comprehensive this assessment is, and compare the assessment, with the screening we have for ESA. If you compare it now, you will now know the difference now between a screening method and then an assessment. So you see all the various domains, you need to know about the client before you, and to be able to plan any treatment. Otherwise, all you can do maybe just brief intervention, but before you are going into treatment and counseling, you can't counsel when you don't know the client. You may end up just directing the client and giving him orders on what to do, but you don't really know the client. So what are the objectives of this module 6? Is to describe person-centered planning. The goals. The goal is to describe person-centered planning and to provide an overview of the process and elements of narrative summaries and person-centered planning. And then the third one is to provide an opportunity for participants to practice writing person-centered narrative summary and treatment plan. So here are the objectives. The module 6 learning objectives. 1, describe what person-centered planning is, and describe the role of strengths-based assessment in creating a person-centered planning. You will notice here that it's strength-based. We're not talking about their weaknesses, but what are their strengths? We want to leverage on their strengths, to be able to plan for their treatment. And then describe the role of the narrative summary in the planning process. What is the role of the narrative summary? The narrative summary is actually, what you do is just the ASI, you only write it in words. You write the ASI in words, and then you'll be able to, take the notes you made by the side of every section into consideration, and then you summarize what what information you got from every section, and also your opinion, and then the rating, your assessment and rating, and whether you think confidence level. So that's what the narrative summary is. If you want to do narrative summary for judge now, I tell you, we may spend the whole time here just doing the narrative summary, because you write it in words and it takes time. So let's move on. And then describe the elements of a person-centered plan. Create person-centered narrative summaries and plans based on case studies. So by the end of this module, you'll be able to meet these objectives. So, and if you want to refer to a narrative summary, you go to a resource page, you find a lot of you find examples there for narrative summary. For instance, if you go to resource page 5.6, you see a comprehensive narrative summaries of one of the clients that was used as an example. But if we want to go for judge and we want to take every score now, it's really going to take our time. But what is it? It is the bridge between the assessment and the plan. The term narrative is used to emphasize that the summary is based in the counselor's words. Yes, you look at the information you got from the ASR. Now you use your words to write it over every section, subheadings, and then you give your opinion, and then your interviewer rating whether you think there's a problem and what is it, and then you rate the need for treatment. The severity rates the need for treatment. Even if the client is undergoing treatment right now, do you think he needs additional treatment that you cannot offer in your own setting or facility that may necessitate you referring him to another setting? So that's what it means. So it's written in the counselor's words. Why treatment is needed at this time? It now tells you why treatment is needed. Why did the client come to you, or why was he referred to you? Why does he need treatment at this time? Does he actually need treatment? And what barriers need to be addressed to support the person in moving towards his or her goals? So from the coding or from the information you obtained and all the notes you made by the site and all the information, and your observation, you'll be able to know the barriers that need to be addressed, because as you are scoring, you are making notes, jotting that notes, pertinent notes. The appreciation of the role of the person's culture and ethnicity in their experiences and recovery. You have to do it in the context of his culture, ethnicity, and even his religious background. Because if you don't do that, then you may be imposing your own ideas or your own treatment plan on the client. So you must do it in that context and record it in a chart narrative and share with the person. You don't make it a hide it. Most times we are used to writing notes, and without our clients, be able to read or to get to know even what we have written. But if you make a narrative summary, you should be able to share it with the person, so that there's that connection, that you understand yourself. You understand, yourself, and you've gotten the right information about the client, and not that you are just having some hypothetical client and not the one that you've actually assessed. And also, identity. There will be identity of who is actually being assessed, and then presenting issues. What are actually the presenting issues? You may have your own idea, or somebody saying, but what is the client presenting to you? Or if it was filed by maybe the court of law, what does the referrer say? But you also have to hear from the client what the issues are, and the psychological environment in which this thing in the client lived and the assessment was done, and the strengths, the preferences, and the priorities. You capitalize on his strengths, not on his weaknesses. The weaknesses will be his barriers, but you capitalize on the strengths to build narrative summary, because That's where the client, you can get the client's cooperation in treatment. And then what are his preferences? You don't impose your own listen, ideas or preferences, on the client. And also, what are his priorities? If the priority is maybe reconcile with the family or to get out of a prison or jail, whatever it is, you don't say no. We need to treat these symptoms first. We need to do this first. No, you have to listen to the client and know what his priorities are, because if you don't go by his own priorities, you'll be doing it alone and you will not get the full cooperation of the client. Then you also note the stage of change, because for every section there are different items. So, and as you probe and as you code them and as he scores them, the severity and then the need for treatment and how broad it is, you will now know the stage of change specific to every target behavior. What if he has a drug problem? What is the stage of change in addressing this drug problem or alcohol problem? If he has a mental health problem, what is the stage of change, with regard to this mental health problem or even physical problem? So you have to know the stage of change for specific target behavior or problem, and don't just lump everything together. Diagnosis and how symptoms are interfering with functioning and life goals. You make notes if he had a mental illness, for instance, and then he tells you you're able to get it. Then you make notes and then find out what was the diagnosis, how was it, did it come about. You have to make notes. He had a mental symptoms, you did a psychiatric session and they had a mental problem. What was the diagnosis? Was there any diagnosis? So you'll be able to, and you have to ask, the client to clarify, the diagnosis. Or you can maybe, if you are a psychiatrist, as you're doing it from, there's a cluster of symptoms that were asked, and they were asking for different things: psychosis, depression, anxiety disorder, so on and so forth. So you'll be able to make and then prompt for diagnosis and then make up your mind. And central themes, the insights and understanding that support effective change efforts. What is the central theme for the client? Are there insights? Does he have insights to problem? Or what insights have you as a counselor even gotten, as a result of actually interacting with the client? You'll be able to get insight. He also will have insights into, some problem, and they know the level of insight and then the understanding that support effective change efforts. So as you find out the insights, the understandings, and then from then support effective change effort, all these things, you get them, you'll be able to glean them from the whole air side. And that's why, you have to check your coding and make sure that you code everything very clearly. And in sum, or in summary, in a nutshell, the narrative summary tries to weave the data together in a way that creates a comprehensive understanding of what's going on with the person. If you look at the narrative summary or the ASI completely, it's like it approaches the problem from a biopsychosocial perspective. There are biological problems, there are social problems, there are psychological problems, but how do they weave together? How can you articulate all these problems now? And they say this is what is happening to this client. What actually do you think might precipitate these problems, and what problems or obstacles or hindrances does the patient have in his own journey, recovery journey? And then you also look out, if you treat this client and then he is fit for discharge, what problem will he encounter? What is likely to make him come back, to treatment? So you have to make sense of the narrative summary. It's not just to collect it haphazardly. And the various facets of his life that there are problems, the various domains, and then how they impact on his life and his well-being. Then you now begin to be able to now plan the treatment together with the client. And then the language too is recovery focused. The strengths and I know you give him what are the strengths and the hope that you instill on the client, and then you look at some self-efficacy, empower him to be able to give you the answers, and then you plan together. But you don't use deficit. It shouldn't be a deficit or problem focus. For instance, he has low self-esteem, or he's uneducated, he's so and so forth, he's just dependent on alcohol. You don't use those things, as such, but you look at the language that will motivate him, that will give him hope, and then will move him, towards change. So you use this language here, diminish the patient, or don't write statements or use words that will, be judgmental or that sound pejorative, whatever. No, you don't use such. But what is positive about the client, what to give him hope, what to encourage the client to change. So what are the examples of deficit focus? Client has low self-esteem, is in denial, or is alcohol dependent, is resistant to treatment because he keeps dropping out of treatment, or he's on probation because he's an addict. When you write this in a narrative summary, you know that the client will just withdraw into his cocoon. He's not happy to hear such things, and it made them feel terrible. And you might not be able to make a headway with such a client, because you're already judging the client, and they are not being positive, you're not instilling hope, on the client. So we avoid language, this kind of language in your narrative summary. And then, how do we change the language? How can you actually rephrase the statement you made, the negative statement? Client has low self-esteem, client is in denial. You can say, for instance, we can say George averages 10 negative self-statements daily. So he makes about 10 negative statements daily to himself, instead of saying, do that. And then you can say, George reports recurring arguments with wife over past 3 months, but states that marijuana use is not a problem. So, most times we are tempted to say he's in denial. Yes, he's in denial. And that gets some of them angry, actually. Why should we say I'm in denial? So it may be judgmental, and that may discourage the client. So you use a positive language that will move him. So if the client is promiscuous, why would you use such a word on your client that is promiscuous? You already judged the client. And you say, of course, I said these people don't even regard me anymore. I'm nothing. Let me just continue with my drug issue. Why do they even want to help me? So, but you can say Miller participates in unprotected sex 4 times a week. So find a way of phrasing it that will be acceptable to the client and will not judge him. Because if you use this negative language, they are not different from those outside. There's no professionality in using negative language. So there is a small group. It's a narrative summary. There's one for that you can read the narrative summary, because of time constraint. Just in the resource page 6.1, you will get the narrative summary that you can use for just a case, that's Kanya's case, and then you find that the assessment of summary and so on and so forth, then the narrative summary outline. If you do that, then you can now go back to the essay that we have scored and attempt to write maybe narrative summary for George, because this one is a guide. So, and I will appreciate it if you can attempt to write it, and then we do it on the assignment and post it there. Then we can read and maybe discuss it further there. As I said, we cannot go. If we want to go into narrative summary for George now and look at everything, I can tell you that we consume the whole time, and BT will not have time to do anything. We can't even finish what we're supposed to finish today. So do this assignment, read this assignment, and then see the guidelines here. And when you do that, then attempt to write that for George. I'll post it on the assignment. Then we'll be able to move forward. So there are questions here, individual questions, and one response is, what 3 things are most important to you at this time? This is just for the participants now. What 3 things are most important to you at this time? Somebody should tell me what 3 things are important to them. It doesn't have to do with the assessment here or the ASI, but just generally in life, what 3 things are most important to you at this time? I want to hear responses, please. Because that will guide us to what we're talking about.
Samuel's hand is raised.
Pardon?
Samuel has his hand raised.
Okay, please.
Okay, Prof. The three things that are important to me at this moment are one, to be safe during this pandemic. Two, to be able to keep up with work during the lockdown. And then three, to be able to take care of family.
Oh, great. That's wonderful. What's his name again, please?
It's Samuel Dakwak.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you very much. That's great. Does anybody have anything to say? Another person? Okay, let's move on. Person-centered planning is a collaborative planning process that supports the preferences and recovery of the person receiving services. It's a collaboration. I would say you must let the patient have the narrative summary what you have found out as you summarize his case or her case, so that you can get along very well in the planning process. So it's collaborative and supports the preferences and recovery of the person receiving services. Preferences. So what happens if Sam says these are his own priority: to keep safe, to be able to do his work, and then also to take care of family. And then we say, okay, no, Sam, that is not important. What's important to you is to make money first. Then when you make money, even if you get COVID-19, you're likely to treat and recover. How will he feel? That is are his preferences. What happens if you alter and say no, and you want to attack it from your own perspective? You can't. Sam will not be happy. So this is what we're talking about. So directed by the client or person receiving services in partnership with treatment providers and natural support. Directed by the client or person receiving services. So you partner as a counselor with the client, and then also look at his own, and then natural treatment provider and then natural support. The support is it from the workplace, family, or whatever. And then intended to identify the strengths, capacities, preferences, needs, and desired outcomes of the person served. Some, when we're moving forward, then it is something that is actually aspirational and desirable. So person-centered planning balances person-centered approaches with eligibility criteria to partner with people and support recovery. What does it mean? Eligibility criteria. How do you know that it's eligible for this for partnership with people and support recovery? It's from the assessment, from the ASI. When you score and when you code, and then you see the need for treatment, because the severity is just telling you about the need for treatment. So if it's eligible based on your own objective assessment, it may be eligible based on subjective and also the objective assessment. Then you now have to balance the person-centered approaches with the eligibility criteria. What do you have to offer? What can you do if you cannot meet all those needs and plan? Can you liaise with other agencies that can provide and then meet the client's need? Is it person-directed, not counselor-directed, and satisfy documentation requirements? What may be the documentation requirement based on best practice? So it satisfies the documentation requirement. Critical aspects of person-centered planning: the inclusion of the person's natural supporters in the care planning process, because the person will leave the facility and go to the community, to the the world out there. So who are his natural supporters in the care planning process? You might need to get them involved at some stage with the client's permission, so that they will support him in this journey, a recovery journey. And then articulation of clearly defined short and long-term personal goals with measurable objectives. It's not to make a blanket statement. He wants to abstain. How does he want to abstain? If he could abstain, he would have abstained when he was at, at home, and he wouldn't have even come to treatment center. So articulation of clearly defined short and long-term personal goals with measurable objectives. You must be able to break the goals into objectives, just like you do here. Those of you are all of us are presumed to be in the academia. You have your own goal, you have your own objectives to be able to meet the goal that you set out to actually meet. So, but what are the objectives that you can measure? And by the end of this meeting those objectives, you know that you have met your goal. That's what it said. The assignment of responsibility for different tasks and action steps to different members of the care team, including the person in recovery. Yes. Now you are working in partnership with the care team, and then you assign who is responsible for what, and how do you know that what you assign is carried out or not? So all the members work in tandem, so that with the person in recovery to be able to achieve whatever goal he sets out to achieve for himself. And the use of tools, shared decision making, and supported employment, housing, etc. So decision making, you help him to make choices, support them in their choices, give them all the information they need, all the support, and the skills that they need to be able to make such decisions. And then what about the employment issues? Even as they are being treated, how are you going to cope? Some of them would have maybe been sacked, at their places of work, or suspended, so on and so forth. What do you do? Because for those of us who are in treatment, you keep writing letters, liaising and negotiating with employers. Please, you can still get back to work, and sometimes they want to terminate the work, or they even want to, they want to suspend them, or they want to demote them. So you have, and those things bother the clients. You have to be able to work. Or he's not out of school. How do you help him when he's stabilized and he desires to, to continue studying? How do you get him back? So these are very important things that you need to do, and they're critical, aspects of person-centered planning. And you know that is what you can measure, and at the end say, yes, I've achieved this objective, and then in the end also the goal is also achieved. So you have to plan with the client, and then what interests him and his preferences, key practices, shared decision making. Client and provider are partners in all planning activities and meetings. There is no master servant here, and you don't impose. And that's why you cannot actually say you are treating a client if you have not actually gone to check and do proper assessment. And then consider both the client's action steps and what his or her provider is going to do towards goal attainment. Client has reasonable control over logistics, including invitees. Who do we invite? You don't impose people on the client. And the location and advance notice. Do it with the client. And clients always offer a copy of his or her plan. Self-efficacy. Give them a copy, because sometimes they say, "Well, I've spent 1 month. When am I leaving this facility? I've spent a month." Okay, based on the treatment plan, our assessment record, we had an assessment, and then we had a treatment plan. Okay, look at your own copy of the treatment plan. How far have you gone? What have you actually, in all these objectives we set out to achieve your goal? Which one which objectives have been achieved? So you don't just give him the answer, but you direct him back to the treatment plan, so that he also knows that he needs to work on it, and then you work together. And the plan is a roadmap as to where you are starting, and then where your destination is, and then you give hope. Just like you see this road, it's a death road, a difficult one, but it's bright. You give hope, and you hope that you get somewhere as you travel, and remove all the obstacles on the road. So it's a roadmap that guides us, and you keep reviewing it from time to time. And then supporting recovery dimensions. You have to think about the individual or the client's own health. His health is very important. And then where he's going to live, and the environment he lives, and the purpose for this treatment. Does it have anything that he wants to do in life. Does he have any purpose for living? Is he focused on anything in life to do to make a meaningful living and then to improve his own quality of life? This is very important. And then he's going back to the community. All this you have to, how does he fit into the community? What would be his role, and the responsibility in the community? How does he interact with them? How does the community support him in this recovery? Because sometimes they can be hostile to them because of very nasty experiences they had with them. But how to prepare them for community life and the community to accept? So all this must be part of the support you give for recovery. And you don't just look at your answer and leave these ones out. No, they are very important because you're looking at the client in total. So it's not screening. This is assessment so that you get to know your client. And you can see this figure here, how he's working, and then he has underneath others who are actually supporting him or her in this recovery. Developing a person-centered treatment plan. First of all, who is requesting service? Is it the client, or he has been referred by some, maybe parents who insist he must come, or is it the criminal justice system? What is it? Who? So you have to take that into consideration. And then what do you do in your assessment? The assessment requires a lot of, you have to build rapport. It's a trusting relationship. You instill hope, and then trust, so that you can get all the correct answers that will help you to plan treatment. Our client was very forthcoming, and he was able to tell us a lot, and he gave truthful answers to our questions. So when you have a client like that, it's easier for you to move along, and then understanding holistically the person or the client you are talking about. That's why I said this is not screening, this is assessment. If you don't assess, you end up giving advice. You're not doing counseling, or you direct the client, that's all. Because you don't even know the person. So where do you start from?
Hey, Moses?
Yes.
I just want to warn you that you have about 15 minutes to go.
15?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Yes. So
Okay.
prioritizing is set the goal, identify the person's strengths and the potential barriers. You look at the objectives. You break the goal into measurable and achievable objectives so that you can achieve your goal, and the services and supports, and then the outcome. So the assessment, as we said, I don't need to dwell on that. A person-centered plan is only as good as the assessment, and the assessment is only as good as the relationship that it is built on. There are times that you find counselors are not able to assess certain clients because the relationship is not good, but other counselors can assess without difficulty, depending on the skills and maybe the experience, so on and so forth too. And then context of planning, personal strengths. You look at the personal strength of the client, interest and activity. What interests the clients? And then living environment, employment, educational skills, financial resources, e.g., income and access to healthcare. You look at all those because you are not dealing. You are dealing with a client who is a human being who interacts dynamically with his own environment and in a psychosocial environment. So you need to look at all those. He's going to leave the facility and go out there. So how does it go? And then lifestyle and health. You must promote health. The lifestyle must promote healthy living and well-being. Personal choice and control. Let them know that they have choices to make, and then self-efficacy to be able to take control of whatever is happening. And then the issue of transportation. Faith and spirituality. Are there religious or spiritual practices that will support the clients, in their recovery journey? So you encourage them, because that can give them some social support. They can get social support there, and that can actually help them, to be acceptable back to their society or communities. And then the relationships that they build is very important, because they can get into the wrong relationship and then they will relapse. Prioritization, yes, we said, where will we start? What are the class goals, not the counselor's goals, or what is important to him or her, and to stay out of jail, reconnect with family, take care of health issues, not what the counselor says, but what his priorities are. And then sometimes you may look at also like the Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That also to guide, where is the client, where is he going to? So you look at the needs. You don't just go tackling something that is at the apex. We are looking at self-actualization when the client doesn't have food to eat, doesn't have shelter, doesn't have clothing. So personal and family values, cultural nuances, personal concerns and perspectives, personal strengths and expertise. You see, assessment and treatment planning is not an easy thing. It's not something that you just stumble on. You must know the client, you must be able to get enough information and then do it. What we do in our own facility is that we have dedicated people for ASI. They do that while the psychiatrists do the psychiatric, mental health examination and other things, medical section. Those ones deal more with the ASI and even the assist if need be, while the psychologists deal with their other psychological tools. Then we sit down and then reconcile notes and then plan for the client together. So client priorities, personal and family values, cultural nuances, personal concerns and perspectives, and then personal strengths and expertise. Where is he good? Where are his strengths? What skills does he have? Then the counselor priorities, basic health and safety, reduction of symptoms, legal obligations, community safety, but you have to balance this with the client's priorities. It's a balance you have to strike, and then because your priority may be at variance with the clients, you have to have a common ground. Recognize the person's fundamental need to live, promote enjoying life over reducing risk, and do not abandon people to suffer the natural consequences of their choices. Some people say he's coming, he's dependent on opioids. Let him go cold turkey. Let him feel the pain. Why do you want to go? Let him feel it. It's his own choice. No, that doesn't work that way. So he needs to enjoy life, and not just to reduce the symptoms, whatever, but let there be some aspect of good quality of life. And then common ground, ensure choice over a wide range of options. Give them options that they can choose. Don't put them in a straitjacket. And counselors and person receiving services are not failures if a choice does not work out. If they make a choice and it doesn't work out, if there's opportunity to learn and then to look at it and then try to, maybe it's a feedback for you, then what do you do now? Maybe try another one, but learn from that and then try another option. Goals, life changes as a result of services ideally expressed in person's words. If the person's words, don't impose, don't write it for the client, let him tell you what he wants, and then positive language, and consistent with the desire for self-determination may be influenced by culture and tradition. Okay, you are now depressed and it has affected you. What would you want to do or achieve if you are not depressed or when the depression leaves? That may be the goal. So use his own language, and or now if you now get over this recovery journey and you're now abstinent, what would you want to do or what would you want to achieve, that you're not able to achieve because of your dependence or so? That will guide you to what the goal is. I want to unite with my family, maybe just the statement. And then objective one, if you want now, the goal is that he wants to unite with his family. So objective one, within 1 month, Rajiv will demonstrate ability to use 3 anger management skills. This is a case of Rajiv who had conflict with his wife, and the wife kicked him out, and they will not allow him to come. He's dependent on heroin, and the wife will not allow him to come and see the kids. So he was bothered because of his anger issues, and then he depended on heroin. So he came to treatment, and this is his goal. I want to live with my family. So you as a counselor will help to bring it into measurable objectives to be able to achieve the goal. Now, objective number 1, for instance, within 1 month, Rajiv will demonstrate ability to use 3 anger management skills. Yes. So he's able to use within 1 month, 3 of them, and then time bound 1 month. Objective 2, within 60 days, Rajiv will have a minimum of 1 successful visit with his children as reported by his wife. So these are how to break the objectives to be able to reach the goal of reuniting with his family, and not just heroin dependence, heroin dependence. Their objectives: client will attend 3 NA meetings a week, complete steps 1, 2, and 3, attend group sessions, meet with the counselor, and then complete 28-day program. So if he does this one, then he'll be okay. Is that what you are suggesting? He may not follow, you may not get any result. So don't do that. That's why you see it's crossed there. You don't do that. It's wrong. And also, goal, we refrain from all substance use now and in the future. That is not. And then the objective, we participate in the outpatient program. We see a counselor once a week and attend a group on Monday nights for 12 weeks. This is a counselor's treatment plan, not the class center. So you don't do that. What are the barriers to goals? Challenges as a result of a substance use or mental disorder. Yes. If there are challenges in activity of daily living because of mental illness or the use of drugs and threats to basic health, if the health is failing, and then there's no safety too, and the need for practical assistance or support. These are challenges that need to be addressed if the client is to achieve it. So you have to look to all this. The assessment will guide you, but other information that you may get to on areas of interest will help you to reach them. And what's getting in the way? Need for skill development, can you offer? Problems in the behavior, what are the problems? List them, how do you go about, solving those problems? And then intrusive symptoms. If you have intrusive symptoms as a result of maybe mental illness, what do you do? And then the lack of resources. So you have to take this into consideration as barriers. Dropping out of treatment before completion, hypothesis. So what prefers alternative coping strategy? If a patient or a client just out of treatment, it's likely because you're not meeting the needs or you prefer other alternative coping strategies. And then he's ambivalent about staying in the treatment, and maybe you don't detect it, and you've not established rapport, and he doesn't trust that you can actually meet his needs. Does not recognize that they are experiencing symptoms, barriers to their goals. There might be experiencing symptoms, so it is another expertise. That's why all facets of this assessment and all domains must be done so that you get to know what might be maybe symptoms that they may be experiencing that may hinder them from achieving their goals. And then interfere with important experiences. And family objects. The family may object to treatment, or maybe a treatment plan interfere with important experiences, and then culturally inappropriate method for addressing experience. That's why it must be in context of your of the patient's culture. Objectives are simple or straightforward, and they will be measurable. The SMART acronym: simple or straightforward, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time frame. Beatrice, I hope I'm not delving into hello, Beatrice. Then the objective wording specifies expected. Yes, I said I hope I've not encroached into your own this thing yet.
You still have about 4 minutes.
Okay. So the objectives must be SMART, and then specify expected changes in behavior, functions. Within X days, the individual family will so as a result of services and support, Mr. X will, as evidenced by, just like we did for Jim. And they must be measurable. Client will decrease arguments with wife within 30 days. For instance, that he will demonstrate to counselor 3 new communication skills, and then he will participate in a minimum of 1 conflict resolution group each week for the next time. So this is something I can measure. This is specific. So, but don't just make a blanket statement. Continued. Client will decrease frequency and intensity of substance use, and then within 30 days, a NIP will identify to the counselor 2 negative effects of marijuana use. That's pre-contemplation. And then judge will be substance free for 6 months, as evidenced by clean urine screens administered randomly. So substance free, evidenced by clean urine. You will say we shouldn't use that kind of language, but it's used here. And then a judge will adhere to methadone dosing schedule when you're talking about barriers. And then what is the barrier? Does he not believe he needs methadone? Within 30 days, referred or judge will identify 3 benefits of taking methadone. So, and then what are the barriers to objective? Judge will adhere to methadone dosing schedule. What is the barrier? If he takes methadone reliably, what will change? Within 30 days, a judge will experience fewer heroin cravings, as evident by self-report in daily self-monitoring diary. And services are not objective. For instance, Vicky will demonstrate increased engagement in services as evidenced by her attendance at 75% of her appointments with her counselor over the next 3 months. So not client will consistently attend all appointments. So it must be objective and then focused. A maximum of 2 or 3 objectives per goal is recommended to create focus. and reduce the chances of feeling overwhelmed. Don't be too many, overwhelm the client with too many tasks. And then process-oriented. A process-oriented objective can be used if it is the most ambitious step the person can take based on functioning or severity of illness. Within 2 weeks, judge will contact 2 potential employers. Within 1 month, judge will complete 3 job applications. Process-oriented. And then another one, short-term outcome-oriented objectives are ideal. Judge wants to get a job. Outcome-oriented objective, within 1 month, judge will complete 4 job interviews. So guidelines, objectives, start where we just have to start to finish. Start where the person is, be as ambitious as possible, but ensure objectives are achievable. Increase expectations over time to support person's progress. These are very important. So objectives, client will stop using all substances. John will complete an intake interview for SUD treatment within 2 weeks. John will create a plan that supports him in obtaining an NA narcotic anonymous sponsor within 30 days. John will remain abstinent as evidenced by clean urine screens over the next 90 days. I would say negative urine screens over the next 90 days. And then objectives, increasing expectations, continued. That's where I think we should end, the slide ends. And then client will improve parenting skills. These are all examples. John will identify 3 preferred realization skills within 2 weeks in his session with his counselor. John will demonstrate his ability to use 3 conflict resolution skills within 1 month in his conflict resolution group. And then John will have 3 non-confrontational conversations with his son within 2 months, as evidenced by his sisters or by his wife's report. So this way I will call it. I think BT will take over from here.
Thank you very much, Moses, for that marathon. Like you indicated, today was going to be a marathon because, like,
thank you for your support, Beatrice.
Yes.
Thank you for your support and patience with me too.
Of course. That's part of our responsibility. I indicated at the beginning I was in darkness, so I couldn't use my video. But something good has happened. Now I have power back, so that's why you can see my face, and I'm happy.
Okay. Thank you.
So now I'm going to share my screen. One of the lessons we've learned is that UTC 5 is very heavy, and for those of us who've learned it in face-to-face, we have also known that it's a heavy curriculum. It's usually covered sometimes in 3 days, sometimes in 5 days. We had planned for it 7 hours of face-to-face in Addis Ababa. We have done over 10, I think close to 10. So we are learning, and we know that probably we should have added it an extra day, but nevertheless, because it's a walkthrough, we've been able to do a lot. So thank you, Moses, for that. So I'm going to continue from where Moses has left it. So we are looking at module 6, and I'm going to go to the next section. And this section is about reminding us just what Moses has said. When we lay out our treatment plan, we must keep in mind a treatment plan is not cast on stone. It isn't a dead thing. It is actually living. It is breathing. That means it must be dynamic. It can change over time, depending on the client's motivation, depending on achievement of certain tasks. For example, you may set out some goals and some objectives, give some timelines, and discover that your client moves through them faster than you had anticipated. That means you need to review your treatment plan. And therefore, this slide is telling us to remember, just like these trees here, these trees sometimes will have leaves, sometimes they'll shed leaves, sometimes the leaves will come back. That's the same way our treatment plan has to be. So we need to desist from the temptation to make a treatment plan, put it in our shelves, and think that is the client's treatment plan. We have to keep looking at it all the time, keep reviewing it, and where need be, even revise the objectives, sometimes revise the goals, as the case may be. Now, the other important component, Moses has told us that treatment plans, person-centered treatment plans have got goals and they have got objectives. So I want to talk about the other aspect of a treatment plan. This is what we call the interventions, sometimes referred to as the services. We are saying that any good treatment plan must indicate the interventions that will be provided to support the client goals. And interventions are the planned services and strategies and methodologies. Please note the use of the word planned. That is to emphasize that they are not ad hoc, they are not random, they are systematic, they are in tandem with the goals and the objectives. I was seeing the examples Moses was sharing with us of what was being called bad objectives. This is because some of those were not objectives, they were actually activities or interventions. And therefore, we are being reminded to know that the interventions that we put in place to achieve the objectives, which will finally help us attain the goals, are actually planned. The other important thing about interventions is that they describe the actions that will be done by many, many stakeholders. It could be by the staff members, it could be the client, it could be the family of the client, it could be the peers that the client interacts with, it could be other natural supports. And where are we getting all this from? Remember in our assessment of George, when we walked through the 7 areas of ASI, we came across different areas of George. We even picked various social relationships of George. All these, remember the employment section, we picked aspects about his job. So from all these areas, we can actually be able to identify some of the natural supports that we can actually begin to bring in as part of the interventions. But as we think about these interventions or these actions by the different stakeholders, or what we are calling supports, we must be sure that these supports we are thinking about respect the client's choice and preference, as opposed to imposing their own ideas. Secondly, we must also remember that these interventions and these actions must be specific to the stage of change and recovery our client is at. So if the client is in the pre-contemplation stage, we might find that the kind of actions needed will differ from the ones when the client is in action stage. They will be different from the ones when the client is in maintenance stage. So we keep that in mind. We also must keep in mind the reason for the intervention. So when we put an intervention like the client needs to make 3 days visits to the counselor, what is the reason for that intervention? Is it tying to the objectives and to the goals? So this is what we are being reminded, that these interventions must be specific to goals, must be specific to objectives. So there must be coherence across the treatment plan, just like Moses was talking about. There are 5 important elements of these interventions. When I looked at them, I summarized them sometimes into what I call 4WH. So 4 W's and 1 H. The first one is who is to do what? So what is the role of the counselor? What is the role of the other service providers? What is the role of the other natural supports? So who is doing what? The second one is the specific service provided. In other words, what is it that they are going to provide? For example, what is it that the counselor will do? What is it that the family will do? What is it that the client will do? What it is that the psychiatrist will do? That is the second element. The third element is around how. So how will this be done? How often? How much time in terms of duration? For how long in terms of intensity? So we need to think about the how of these activities, of these interventions. The fourth one is where, the location of the services. Where will this be done? So if we're saying the client will attend weekly sessions of counseling outpatient, where will that be? If we say this client will need to be seeing a physician once in a month, like you remember our client George had a chest problem that he was concerned about under medical status. So we want him to see a physician. Where is this physician? So the fourth element is the where. And finally, the last element has to do with the why. What is the purpose of that service? What is the purpose of that action? So if we want George to attend a weekly sessions of outpatient, or we want George to practice some skill every day or every week, what is the purpose of that action? So in summary, these 5 elements can be actually summarized as the who, the what, the how, the where, and the why. That's why I called it the four W's and 1 H. So let's keep that in mind. The other important thing about the interventions, when we are talking about the who, we need to be very clear. Who is doing what in terms of the client role, the family member role, and the other natural supports of the client. Now we have an example here of a case study of someone called Chadney, and we are told Chadney came to the treatment clinic asking for help with cocaine use. The son and daughter-in-law were tired of her demanding behavior when she's craving, and they no longer want to spend time with her. She's agreeing to treatment and came in for an intake assessment. In her assessment, she reports periods of sadness, tiredness, dating back to before she started using. And you're supposed to use that case study to do this little activity in groups. Of course, we won't be able to do it now. You're supposed to establish 3 goals for this client. And for each goal, you're supposed to come up with an objective, and then you're supposed to assess the strengths as well as the potential barriers, and finally say what treatment intervention the counselor and the client can agree to. Please remember, Moses has emphasized on person-centered planning. That is to say, it's not the counselor that will dictate upon the client what they think should be the interventions. There has to be collaboration. Let's keep that in mind. So you can always do this when you go back to your institutions. The final important part of our treatment plan is what we call the outcomes. The outcomes are basically the indicators that we have succeeded in trying to achieve our goals and objectives. So we say that the outcome of successful person-centered treatment planning is shown in the fact that the person has developed the skills and the knowledge they require to support their own recovery and wellness. Please note some words there that are highlighted. Own recovery. And every time we work with clients and we think that it is time to discharge them after the period our treatment programs tell us, we need to ask ourselves, has this client developed adequate skills and knowledge to be able to support their own recovery, their own wellness? Now, for us to be able to answer this question, we go back to our objectives, we go back to our goals, and then we go back to our assessment report. What are the assessment needs that came out of the report? And the narrative summary. What are the goals that we set? What were the specific objectives which were measurable and smart? And what kind of interventions did we put in place? And so what kind of outcomes are we having? Sometimes we may put in place interventions, and when we evaluate the outcomes, we have not succeeded. So what do we need to do? We need to go back to the drawing board, relook our interventions, see whether we need to revise the interventions to achieve the goals that we had set. If, for example, we had indicated that we want the client to be attending 3 outpatient meetings as a way of supporting their abstinence, and when we evaluate outcome, we discover that our client is still not having sufficient capacity and confidence to support their recovery, we might want to revise that intervention and make a decision together with the client that maybe we need to try an inpatient residential program instead. So that is a review of our intervention based on our outcomes. So when we think about our client-centered planning, we must constantly look at our outcomes, evaluate them, see whether we need to go back to the drawing board and revise and rework some of the areas of our treatment plan. So that is basically what we have in that area. There are many exercises here. Please take time to look at them. And you can even write the key learnings that you have acquired in your journal and all the other nice things that you normally write. So that is the end of module 6. So I'm going now to share module 7, which is the other very important module in this curriculum. Now, just remember the journey we have walked through. We began by doing screening. Then we went to assessing our clients. And then we developed our treatment plan. Now, in module 7, we want to ask ourselves, should we keep any records? Should we document what we do with our client? And these are the objectives of module 7. By the end of it, we hope that you can describe the importance of keeping accurate and complete client records. Those are 2 important terms. I know many times we keep records, but the question is, are they complete? Are they accurate? You might discover they are not necessarily so. The second objective is to be able to list at least 5 guidelines for effective documentation. So I know we document, but it's likely that our documentation is not effective. The third one is to explain the importance of documentation in the process of screening for client treatment eligibility. This is a very unique and important point. Sometimes we think if the client is not eligible to our program, we don't need to keep documents. But what if this client goes and sues us and says we denied them access to treatment? What evidence can we show to demonstrate that we screened and we identified some of their needs, and we looked at our treatment eligibility criteria, and we noticed that it did not match the client's needs? So we referred the client to another center. So this is the importance of that third objective. The fourth objective is to explain what we call the SOAP format of progress notes. So we're going to see how we can make client progress notes using a format we call SOAP. And finally, we are going to demonstrate how to actually make SOAP notes based on a case study. So that's the purpose. So the purpose of record keeping, overall purpose, and this is important, the overarching purpose is to be able to have a central file or a single file that contains information about the client from all the different sources that we can use to enhance care. I have been to treatment settings where you find that the information about the client is so fragmented. The counselor has got some information, but it's not recorded anywhere. The other service provider has some information, it's not recorded anywhere. So even when you want to move this client from one level of care to another one, you actually can't get a picture around that client. Other times when the client is not doing well and you want to revise their care, you notice that you cannot because there's someone who has never put in some record about the client. So it's important that we keep a central file containing all information regarding the client's treatment, all the way from their intake, their screening, their assessment, their treatment plans, the evaluation of the outcomes, and any other unusual occurrences. So why do we document? We document the screening, assessment, and diagnostic information so that if you go to the client's file, you can see the screening output, you can see the assessment output, you can see the diagnostic information. Secondly, very important, we document eligibility and the need for treatment. So based on the screening of the client and sometimes the assessment, we are able to tell, can this client be handled in this setting? Some of our treatment programs have certain limitations. Remember, for example, when we covered co-occurring disorders, we said that some programs are SUD only. Others were SUD enhanced, others were SUD capable. So when you're doing your screening and you discover your client has a disorder that you're not able to handle, then you need to be able to document that and record that that client was referred to another treatment program because of their needs. The third purpose is to track the progress of the client throughout treatment. Now we have said these are things we need to do as the client keeps moving. Why is it important to track a client record and progress through treatment? So that we can be able to document the changes to the treatment plan, for example, like we have said, to be able to document interventions that have been provided over time, to be able to make the session progress notes, to be able to document critical incidents. For example, a client may attempt suicide in your treatment center. That's a critical incident. Documenting that incident is helpful because anybody working with that client in future will look at that file and see that this client has a vulnerability. And so those are very important things that we put in our client's files. Then of course, preparing the discharge summary, which will help anybody taking over the client or doing follow-up to know what it is that they need to do. The other important purpose of record keeping is to be able to communicate about the client to other treatment people within or other treatment service providers within the center, or even if you want to refer them to another program. Now, record keeping helps to protect the client from misunderstandings, and it does facilitate treatment. Imagine now, if you have certain information about the client, maybe you are on duty. During that time, you noted that the client is demonstrating a general lack of motivation, did not participate in any of the activities of the day, and so on and so forth, but you didn't record that. Now, another person comes to work and takes over the shift, and they don't know the problems you had detected with the client during the day. then the client becomes aggressive and probably causes some harm to another client. It's probably that he's actually doing that out of the symptoms and signs that he exhibited during the day, which were not documented by anybody, and nobody made a note to say, keep an eye on client X. So these are the things we are saying. If we keep properly, we can actually protect our clients from misunderstandings and enhance their treatment. And of course, finally, and I'm saying this finally because we never want to record keep for this purpose, because if we do for this purpose only, it will not be client focused. We record keep because sometimes it can actually protect our agency and our counselors in cases of legal and ethical issues. So this is very important from a professional and legal perspective. Please remember this. There is always this saying that if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So you may be doing all these beautiful, nice things in your treatment center, but you do not record them. The assumption is because it was not recorded, it never happened. That would be very sad. So let us document and document. Now, sometimes we don't document because documenting is confusing. Sometimes we don't even know how to document. Actually, I must make a confession. Documenting is very overwhelming. So here we have some guidelines that can help us to effectively document and make documentation an easier process for our colleagues. The first thing that's important is the need to distinguish between what is factual data from an opinion or hypothesis. Sometimes we confuse the two. So it's important to know what is factual, what is an opinion, what is an hypothesis. When we come to the SOAP notes, we are going to see some good examples. Secondly, we need to be timely. Timely means doing it at the right time. If you miss to do it at the right time, and a good example is what I was saying. So the client was exhibiting some suicidal tendencies. Someone did not note that down and was hoping to note the next day. That evening, they actually attempted suicide or even committed suicide. That would be tragic because you were not timely in your documentation. Writing in a legible way. I know many of us are doctors here. In my country, we say that when the doctors write, you can't read, but it's not just the doctors, actually lecturers. In my university, we say when the lecturer writes, you can't read. We are being challenged that effective documentation requires we write in a way that's legible. We also encourage our staff to use correct spelling, correct grammar, because these notes can be read by someone else and they need to be understood. The fourth bullet, which is very important, never write anything that you'd be embarrassed for the client or others to read. Remember, your notes could be read by someone else. Your notes could be read by the client. What kind of language are we using? Sometimes we use nasty language in our notes about clients. We need to be sensitive. And finally, very important point, we need to sign and date everything that we write about our client. The other important thing is documenting what we call clinical appropriateness. When we screen and do intake, we are able to determine whether a certain program will meet the needs of a particular client. And I gave an example. If you screen at intake, discover the client has a co-occurring disorder, you might discover that that client cannot fit in your setting. Why? Because you're an SUD only client. So your program should offer only treatment services that are reasonable, necessary, and appropriate. But if that client can't fit in your treatment program, point number 3 says you must document that, whether your program was appropriate or not appropriate for that particular client. This is a way of ensuring that you're accountable and you protect your program just in case that client sues you or reports you that you discriminated against them and you refuse to take them in. That is what we are talking about. So document the clinical appropriateness or lack of appropriateness of your program for that client. Other times you may admit a client into your program, and then later on, something happens to the client, and someone challenges your program and says, you admitted that client and you knew you did not have the capacity to handle them. Where are you going to show the evidence that you did an assessment of your program against the client's needs and determined that you should admit that client? That's what this slide is talking about. The other important information is where we document the demographic information about the client and also demonstrate that the client's demographic variables met the criteria for our program. Sometimes you may have a program which says we don't admit adolescents, we admit over 18. We don't admit women, we only admit men. We only admit this kind of clients, and so on and so forth. Now, are you able to demonstrate that you documented the client's demographic information and you were able to compare it against your basic criteria and your client fitted in your treatment setting or did not fit, as the case may be? Sometimes I have seen treatment programs for adults admit children, and those children get sexually abused in those programs, and people get into lots of litigation because of these cases. And there, some of the questions that are asked is, did you assess the client's demographic factors and see that they were eligible for admission in your criteria? In fact, sometimes you're told to show, demonstrate what is your program's basic admission criteria in terms of demographics. So these are some of the things we are being told we should document. The other thing, of course, is about eligibility into your program. Not necessarily now based on the demographics, but just based on the narrative summary. Remember, Moses took us through the narrative summary, which highlights what are the key things we need to focus on for our client. So this is reminding you that after you do the narrative summary, you need to show or demonstrate that your program was going to meet the needs of that client. So your client met the eligibility criteria for your admission into your program. And that is emphasized very significantly and repeatedly. So this is a small exercise again, where you're supposed to invent a treatment program. And imagine that you're developing a treatment program, you're listing the eligibility requirements, who should be admitted, what is the criteria to know that someone should be included or excluded, and then you come up with a case study and you try to match the case study or the characteristics of that client to your eligibility requirements. And then you document whether they fitted in or did not fit in, why, and what did you do. That's what this exercise is about. Now, the final section of our presentation is how to write progress notes. Now, progress notes is what we write on a day-to-day basis or a session-to-session basis with our client. That's why we are calling them progress. It is not the notes we write at the end, the summary, this is, or the narrative summary or the discharge summary. This is what we are doing to track what we are working on with our client on a day-to-day basis. So we are being told that if you're in a clinical session, you write them on a daily basis, after every session you have. If you're in a residential program, you write them at the end of each day. If you're an outpatient program, you write at the end of every session you have with your client. Please ensure your notes have a date of the session and they also have the length of time you took with that client. They also must be signed by the author, if it's the counselor, and the credentials included. Remember, these are actually notes that can be taken to a court of law to support you or the program if a case is made against you and your program. Some programs may have supervisors who co-sign these progress notes just to show that they have read and they are monitoring and they are concurring with what is happening. So one of the evidence-based formats of writing progress notes is what we call SOAP, S-O-P. Now, the SOAP format is an interesting thing because it kind of provides a mini assessment every time you make these notes. Why? Because in a way, you have done a snapshot of the session. In that snapshot, like you're going to be seeing, you have in a way done a quick assessment. It ensures, and this is very important, that counselors really think about what it is they are doing with the client, what's happening to the client, and what needs to happen next. I remember when I was in counselor training, we had this supervisor of ours when we went to do a counseling practicum, who gave us some templates to make case notes, and they were very, very detailed. And it was so much hard work for us. And we were cursing at the end of it. But when we finished, we realized that for the first time you could tell you were conscious of what you were doing with the client. Because after every session you had to write notes. So you had to think, what did I just do with the client? What was it I was trying to achieve? Did I achieve it or did I not achieve it? What do I think I should do for the next section? So that is what progress notes are about. So what does SOAP stand for? S stands for subjective, O is objective, A is assessment, P is plan. So what does subjective mean? It refers to the subjective data that the client gives us. For example, if the client makes some observations or gives some of his thoughts or his feelings or gives a direct quote, that is something you must record. So for example, the client might say, I feel extremely demotivated today. Now that's a subjective data from the client, which is very important. One time I had the client says, today I'm struggling to pull through this day. I don't feel like attending any one of those sessions. That's a client observation. It is subjective. You're not necessarily seeing them. So we record that in a brief and concise way. Then we have objective data. Objective data now isn't what the client is telling you. It is what you're observing. And I know Moses has been talking about that. So when you're interacting with the client, you have seen what their affect was like. You've seen what their mood was like. What was their appearance? Record this objective data. For example, you might say the client today seems to be in a low mood. The client looked absent-minded. That is your objective data, which you actually do in what would be like a mental status examination. At the same time, if you had given any tests to be done on this client and the results have come in, you can include them as part of your objective test. For example, you can say the client's drug test came out clean or came out negative or positive, as the case may be. That can also be part of objective data. We are challenged here that we should avoid labeling and giving personal judgment about our clients. The third area is called assessment. This is basically your impression of the client in general. What do you think about that client in terms of strengths and challenges? So for example, you can actually make a judgment and say, looking at the client today, it seems the client's motivation for treatment is actually waning. And this client would require, so you would say what it requires, and that's what P stands for. It can also be informed by the results of any testing, screening, or assessment. And it can also pick from the client's current response to the treatment plan. So that's what we mean. The general overall evaluation of the counselor, of the clients during that time in terms of their strengths and their challenges. Finally is P. P stands for plan. So having made that general assessment of the client, what is your next step? Remember, you have heard what the client has said. You have observed for yourself in terms of the O. You have made a general assessment. What plan of next steps do you do? You recommend perhaps there should be changes in the treatment plan. Maybe we need to change the interventions we had made. Maybe we need to revisit the goals and the objectives. These are the things that we work on in the plan. And then of course, if there are any topics to be discussed in the next section or in the next session or the next day, are there any homework assignments we are giving or we have given? We capture this in the plan. So that's a summary of our SOAP notes. Some guidelines for making SOAP notes. First and foremost, you must record immediately after each session. And I know when I say this, it's challenging because sometimes some of us work in sections or in settings where we see clients almost back to back. It's advisable, even if you're not going to record them in, what is it called, longhand, you can do some shorthand, then you can make them better after. But please record immediately so that you don't forget. Be brief, keep quotes to a minimum, and only capture the quotes that are very striking. So if a client gives, like a client could say something like, today I felt like murdering my roommate. That's an interesting quote that you would want to quote. So keep the quotes to a minimum. Use an active voice. Active voice means the client was talking about doing. So if the client said, I felt like hurting him or I felt like killing myself, that's active as opposed to a passive voice where someone else is the one doing. Use precise and descriptive terminology. The other important thing, you start each new entry with the date and time. Please write in a way that's legible and neat. Remember the spelling and grammar. Remember to document all contacts or attempted contact. And it's advised to use a black ink if notes are written in handwritten, and signing off legally, and put your title. Those are very important things. Now there's an activity here which we will not do, but instead I want to open for you from the trainer's manual a sample of some SOAP notes. So I'm going to share from the participants manual some sample SOAP notes. Yes, so that you can just get an idea of what SOAP notes look like. So this is an example. This is resource page 7.1. This is the first example. So in the subjective section, that is S, this is what this counselor records. Client reported feeling depressed since his wife and children left him and he was forced to go into treatment. He stated, "I don't believe in treatment, but I'm giving it a try as long as it will help bring my wife and children back." He said, "I feel sad and empty when they left. I wanted to talk to my wife." What you notice about that subjective statement is the client's feeling. Client is reporting what he feels. And you see the counselor has also captured some quotes which have some heavy weight. That's what you are talking about. In terms of objective now, this is the observations the counselor makes. The counselor has written, "The client was withdrawn and guarded and tearful at times." You see the objective observations of the counselor. Then in terms of assessment, the counselor has written overall. So you can see, we said the assessment is the overall picture. So overall, the client appears uncertain towards treatment. He seems to be depressed. He would benefit from further mental health evaluation. That is the general overall assessment based on the subjective and the objective. And finally is the plan. The counselor writes, "The client will continue with the residential treatment program. He agreed to attend at least one session per week, group therapy, and given ongoing depressive symptoms, we'll refer him for mental health assessment." So you can see in a very concise way and just a paragraph. That's why we can be able to write these SOAP notes after every session, because they're actually brief and to the point. And you can look at your own time at example 2. You can also see that it is precise and very, very concise. So that is what SOAP notes are about. So thank you very much. I know it's been a marathon, but I do hope now we understand what screening, actually intake, screening, assessment, treatment planning, and documentation is all about. It's been heavy, it's been loaded. I hope we can interact much more in the LMS, but I want to thank you all on behalf of my colleague Moses and Jessica and Kim, and of course Morekwe, for the patience you have had, especially in this UTC 5, because it has called upon all of us to go an extra mile to try and see that we covered all the material. So I congratulate you for having passed that. And I remind you that the next 2 modules are going to be much smaller, in fact, 3 days each. So this was the heaviest of them all. And of course, when we come to UTC 8. So for now, I say thank you to you, and I hand it over to Jessica. If my colleague Moses first to say something to you, then we hand it over to Jessica. Thank you. Moses?
Thank you, participants, for actively participating. It's been worthwhile, really, having this program. And thank you, George, for being a very good patient. Even when you are making mistakes, the patient is able to detect that you are not actually doing the right thing. Doing SI on this medium is the first experience for me. It's very difficult. And it's one of the difficult aspects actually that needs a lot of concentration. So you have done well so far. And thank you, Beatrice, for being an able leader and for the support. Thank you all. Jessica.
So first of all, thank you all for staying with us throughout this entire UTC 5 course, and thank you for allowing us to extend today. That was very helpful. Oh, I believe I am frozen. Okay, I'm back. And I do have one very important announcement to make. So Kim, Moses, Beatrice, and myself were informed that we will no longer be able to use Zoom as a platform for these sessions starting on Monday. and we will be transitioning to another platform called Cisco WebEx. And I will be sending all of you information this weekend so that you know how to download the application and join the meetings on Monday when we start UTC 6. And I will also remind you that you should probably try to join the meeting a bit early just to make sure that you know how to use the application correctly. And you can email us with questions if you have trouble getting in. And that is the only announcement that I have. And
I think, Jessica, it might be important if we agree, all of us, on Monday to join the class 1 hour before, so that we can practice, play around with it, make sure we are safe, so that nobody is left out because of the new platform. So we shall open as early as 1 hour before for purposes of practicing to get familiar with that platform. That's what I think will be helpful to us all. Thank you.
Definitely. And I will start working on putting together a guide for using the new system well before Monday's meeting. So you guys should have adequate time to prepare. And I believe that is all, unless anyone else has anything to add. All right, well, good night.
Someone is asking the name of the new system. Maybe you, it's called WebEx. Did you say WebEx?
Yes, it's Cisco WebEx. I'll put it in the chat so everyone can see it.
Yes, you can put in the chat. Yes, Jessica has put it in the chat. It's called Cisco WebEx. So you can go and start Googling it and finding it and downloading it and liking it. That's one of the things Moses and I will have to start doing as well. So we are all in it
yes.
together.
We're working on finding the tutorials so we become well versed in it before we start using it.
Yeah. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.